After Thanksgiving, in the teeth of the holiday rush, so we thought we'd talk about a holiday movie.
Do you want to take that again?
No, I do not want to take that again. And after about 5 minutes of discussion, we decided to settle on Home Alone. The first one. The second one's actually good, but the first one being the seminal entry into the franchise. It is really a franchise. There have been 4 or 5 or 12 Home Alone movies at this point.
I believe there have been 5.
All right.
And only 3 of them were theatrically released.
Fair enough. Will, being from Chicago, you know about the gravitativity and the polarity of when they were going around filming those in the Chicago area and the impact of such an important film in Chicago cultural history. Put your glasses on.
I
Got
did.
your PhD on the wall.
By the way,
behind
I'm
you.
Will. Hi.
There you go. All right. So Home Alone, you want to go into some of the prehistory before we get into the actual film itself?
I almost feel like we should at least summarize, because if you haven't seen Home Alone...
Spoilers, if you haven't seen Home Alone, I don't know how you could have avoided it unless you've been living in a foreign land for the last 30 years, but fair enough.
I think part of why this was on my radar was it came as a happy surprise. I signed up for Disney Plus to watch The Mandalorian, and there, because it was part of the Fox library that is in with the tone of Disney Plus.
Was it something that was included? Because I know Fox gave up all their Marvel stuff, right? I don't know, the Fox movie...
Right, so that's why The Empire Strikes Back and the original trilogy movies that were
right. So I guess part of that deal when Disney bought all of Fox's movie stuff, I guess part of that must have been Home Alone.
Yes.
So it's there on Disney Plus.
The first 3 Home Alone films are on Disney Plus.
I will probably never watch the third one.
I can speak to... I watched the third one when it was on cable, and it's actually really funny. The kid's not bad.
Is it a different Culkin brother?
No Culkins. It's not even like the kid's not supposed to be Kevin McAllister. If I'm remembering correctly, it's been a little while. The family isn't even really gone. There's some issue where he has to be home alone after school. He has somehow accidentally come across like a microchip or something these international terrorists want to use. So they're trying to get into the house. There is even a point where there's a fake out where one of the guys drops his gun. And then later on, it's like almost a Die Hard-esque moment where the kids and one of the terrorists are in a stare down and the kid has a gun.
Mexican standoff?
No, because that would mean the bad guy has a gun. The bad guy doesn't have a gun.
Oh, I see.
And the bad guy backs down. Later on, there's kind of a cheat out that this is a squirt gun that looks exactly like a real gun, and the kid would never have used... He has already put the real gun down the laundry chute. Or somewhere off camera, but he makes a concerted effort, not conceited effort. He removes the actual gun. There was some weird kids shouldn't play with guns message, and there's also a super smart bird that helps him.
All right.
It was on cable. I forgot what I was doing. I threw it on, and I was actually surprised that it had a coherent plot. It touched on a lot of the hallmarks of what make Home Alone movies entertaining.
Sure. Now, as I explained pre-show, I was living overseas around the time that this was being made, so I don't have much memory of it. I don't remember even if I saw it in the theaters. I actually think I didn't. I think everything that I know of this movie comes off of cable TV rotation. Now, you were obviously living in the Chicago area when they were filming this and priming it. Do you have memories of what was going on with that? Was it a big deal at the time that they were filming it around? I don't know where you were, where that town was, that suburb.
Honestly, I didn't stock movie sets. I was 14 when they were in production on this. I know the house that they shot the exteriors for was in Evanston. I grew up in Rogers Park, which is about as far north as you can get before Chicago stops being Chicago and turns
so is that
into
on
Evanston.
The opposite side of town from Evanston, or is it close?
Evanston is the nearest north suburb.
Okay.
Probably should have looked it up before the podcast, but I don't know if they shot all the interiors. I know some of it was a soundstage, and that's how they did the bigger stuff. The house itself was in Evanston. I know they shot things like the train station, I think in Lake Forest, a lot of the downtown area. Evanston is a beautiful suburb. Shout out to anyone from Evanston. I never had any rivalry. But it was a thing because John Hughes kept making movies. in and around Chicago. People were excited because it was another John Hughes movie. I think it's the first one that leaves Shermer, Illinois.
Now, was that an actual place?
No, Shermer, Illinois was a fake place that was invented for all the earlier Hughes movies. So Pretty in Pink and Ferris Bueller and The Breakfast Club and 16 Candles all take place in Shermer, Illinois.
Okay, so
I don't know what the alchemy is that makes a great Christmas movie. I think they have to be a little scary, a little dark. There has to be some sense of jeopardy.
I think my ultimate Christmas movie is probably A Christmas Story, which definitely has some dark parts. I'm not so sure about the jeopardy part unless we're talking about him getting the red rifle or not. But it definitely has some dark bits to it.
For example, when the lamp gets smashed.
That doesn't seem dark in the movie. It actually seems, in a way, progressive, since the lamp is this really kind of gross trophy.
But that moment when he's just devastated.
Yeah, but it always seems comical. The dad doesn't seem seriously devastated.
Okay, so a bigger deal is when he finally snaps and he beats up Scott Fargus.
Yes, there is the Santa Claus comes up a bit scary.
He's afraid he's going to get in trouble because he swears his head off.
Right.
And because it's a kinder, gentler... That was a Bob Camp movie.
Yes.
Bob Clark made that movie, and the other famous Bob Clark movie is Porky's. And they couldn't be more different in how they treat their...
Right, so I don't want to get off on a tangent about A Christmas Story. We're here to talk about Home Alone.
That's the thing, is there's something very interestingly connected about Home Alone and National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, because again, they're both Chicago movies.
Right. They obviously share some DNA behind the scenes.
Some DNA behind the scenes. Family dysfunctionality is a big constant. That's the holidays in general.
Right, but in essence, they're kind of inverted, right? Because in Christmas Vacation, Chevy Chase can't get rid of some of his family, or he's got too much family around him.
Right.
He's smothered by family. Whereas the big thing in Home Alone is that Kevin wishes away his family, and at least at the beginning, or I guess until they show up, he just assumes that he was successful in actually banishing his family to some kind of Phantom Zone, Twilight Zone style.
Right. That's one of the things I do love about the movie, is that for as smart and as logical as Kevin seems to be, he's still a kid that believes in magic.
Yes, but he's also afraid of the furnace and things. So, yes, he's very smart, but they show him to have these foibles. He's scared of stuff. He's scared of the old man who lives across the street.
Old
he's
man
scared
Marley.
of the furnace. So let's get into it. So spoilers, we've already spoiled small things, but just to go through and give a plot overview. Kevin comes from a fairly mean, jerkish family. I maintain the dad and mom are pretty cool. Everyone else is kind of different shades of jerky, including Kevin himself. And they're all piled in the house. They're all packing. They're all getting together because they're going on this huge journey to France over the holiday. There's different family members. They're all squabbling. No one wants to help Kevin with his luggage. They tell him he's going to have to sleep with the kid who pees the bed.
Played by his brother Kieran.
Right. There's trouble at the pizza dinner. Soda is spilled.
His older brother Buzz antagonistically ruins the cheese pizza, which is the only one Kevin wants. Everyone hates Kevin. The pizza guy hates Kevin.
We don't know that the pizza guy hates Kevin. The pizza guy doesn't care. He's just like, thanks for the tip.
There's that moment where his mom, played by the wonderful Catherine O'Hara, says something like, be nice, say thank you to the pizza guy, and he says, you should have brought more cheese pizzas. Kevin has a full-blown meltdown. He's taking no prisoners.
Right, but that has nothing to do with the pizza guy's angle. The pizza guy's face is just, whatever, thanks for the tip.
But it establishes early on, Kevin has a number of axes to grind, because the pizza guy comes back into the story later.
He does, but we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
He gets into a fight with basically his entire family. He tells off his mother using very mean words and phrases. Basically, I hate you. I wish you would go away. I don't want to be around you anymore. I want to be rid of all of you. He goes to sleep. There's a power outage during the night.
One of the most brilliant things about this super chaotic opening is that there is a policeman standing.
I was going to get into that.
Okay.
While all this is happening, Joe Pesci, pretending to be a policeman, is casing the joint. At this point, he seems like quite the wily criminal, which won't last.
Well, he plays it so straight-laced until he smiles when we see his gold tooth.
Right. And that's the tell for us as the audience that, hey, this guy's not on the level. Everyone else buys into it, and he's asking everybody, are you going away for the holidays? What are your plans? We just want to make sure you know your house will be safe. Everyone just takes him at his word that he's a cop. He's dressed as a cop. Seems to have all the accoutrements. But of course, what he's really doing is trying to figure out which houses in the neighborhood are going to be vacant over the holiday so that he can burgle them with his partner, Daniel Stern.
Right. In that moment that the movie establishes this will be super real. Because when he smiles and exposes his gold tooth, it actually gleams and there is a ding.
Yes. You say super real, you mean they're not playing it straight-laced. Because yes, up until that moment, it's playing it pretty straight. This could have been a family drama. The kids squabble. Everything seems pretty real. Maybe some of the dialogue's a little over the top. Kevin's called a jerk by his uncle. You shouldn't be calling first or second graders jerks.
There are different stock John Hughes characters. I don't think it's impossible that Kevin could grow up to be Bender in Breakfast Club. Because he's coming from affluence, but he's sort of a renegade.
Yeah, but his dad doesn't seem like a Bender dad type. Now, that uncle who's calling people jerks, he could be the Bender dad.
Yeah,
I don't
maybe.
see... great John Hurd would not be Bender's dad.
Kevin feels very much like a proto-affluent Hughes kid.
Sure. Now, Buzz, he's a Bender in the making just of his own accord. He's a jerk.
Buzz is a jerk, yeah.
A lot of them are jerks. He's called a disease at one point. One of his sisters with her nose in the air calls him the French word for being...
Incumbent.
There you go. So he gets sent to his room up in the attic, but during the night there's a power outage. Alarms don't go off. Everybody panics downstairs. I think Catherine O'Hara, the mom, is the first to wake up, and the airport express van is waiting. There's some annoying kid from across the street who's nosing around everything so that when they're getting ready to leave and one of the sisters who's in charge doing roll call counts all the kids, she accidentally counts the wrong kid while Kevin is upstairs asleep in the attic. They all zoom off to the airport. Kevin wakes up alone and thinks, because some of his last words before going to bed was, "I wish you would go away," wakes up and everybody's gone.
Kevin has this electric moment where he believes that he's magic.
Right, that he wished them away to the cornfield. But they never actually build on that, because he never tries to wish anybody else to the cornfield. When things happen down the line, they
that's
never
a good point. He
that.
doesn't try to wish Harry and Marv away.
No, or wish for stuff, or wish for, I don't know, anything to happen. They just have that moment and then just let it go. But it is good in that time because he does take steps to actually try to figure out what's happened. He goes outside. He sees that the cars are all there. They're still in the garage because they took the vans. I can believe that as a kid, you're not aware of how the family's getting to the airport. It's very conceivable that he didn't know they were taking essentially taxis. So that just feeds into his illusion that he did wish them away. And then you get to have all the great
So it's like the
games.
Leftovers, where it just happened and they're never going to explain why or how. It's just, this is...
Well, we know because we see them going to the airport and getting on the plane. And
I'm talking from Kevin's perspective.
Right.
This one magical event happened and life moved on.
Basically. And then he's jumping up in the bed, eating microwave popcorn. He's watching his old movies. They don't really explain why he loves these old gangster black and white movies.
Somebody pointed out that Kevin would more likely watch something like Aliens or Predator on VHS, but what he really wanted to watch that he wasn't allowed to watch was the fake noir detective film Angels with Filthy Souls.
Right, which they don't explain why he loves. I don't even think they have a moment where he tries to watch it and is denied. I think he just pops it on now that he's all alone and throws it on there.
He pops it on. What you don't realize, because a lot of people thought that was a real movie and that they made the film work around it.
That seems hard to believe, since the stuff that happens in that movie makes no sense at all. It's just kind of goofy, overly... I know there's angels with dirty faces, this is angels with dirty souls. I don't know, it seems pretty obvious to me as an adult. Yeah. Filthy souls. It seems pretty obvious to me that's not a real movie, but I once convinced some kids that Spinal Tap was an actual documentary, so you never can tell. You've got some chicken scratch.
I got all sorts of conspiracy theories here on my notepad. Kevin's having a grand old time, and he
has to face his fears. They do the stuff where he's afraid of the furnace, and he has to overcome that fear. He's afraid of basically everything, and then he makes a statement I'm the man of the house now, so I can't hide under the bed.
His brother had told him there is an old man across the street who seems focused on keeping the ice and snow free, which... in Chicago, we call them heroes because the city is covered in ice and snow for at least 4, if not 6 months out of the year. Old Man Marley is doing this the night before they leave for Paris, and Buzz, Kevin, and one of the cousins observe him. Buzz says that He murdered his entire family in 1958 and got off because there wasn't enough evidence. He keeps his victims in the trash can full of salt because that's where he dries out their bodies.
Yeah, it's a grisly little folk story. He's one of those actors that always plays spooky older guys with vacant stares.
Yeah, and considering Chicago, we had the Ripper crew, and we weren't strangers to having serial killers.
Now, do you think Marley is a call to Scrooge and Marley?
I do. I didn't find anything that backed that up, but Marley is synonymous with the good and misunderstood character behind the scenes.
And he helps Kevin. He helps Kevin along.
Marley, that's a character whose arc is redemption. Marley is part of Scrooge's redemption because he comes back to Scrooge. He's the first ghost.
Right, and he had already taken the punishment that's waiting for Scrooge, and he's back to try to help Scrooge avoid that same punishment.
Right.
In the case of the movie, this is an old man that we learn further down the line that he's been excised from his family and is suffering for it, which is the future that Kevin would have if we assume his family's never coming back.
Right. Kevin is enjoying being on his own until the two villains, played by Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern, Harry and Marv respectively, first try to break into the house. He is smart enough just to turn on the lights and make noise, and they go away.
I want to point out that there is a maturing arc. Kevin goes through steps where he matures, gets over some of his more childish things. He starts going to the supermarket, he's doing laundry, he goes to church where he hangs out with Marley, he gives Marley advice.
He sees Marley watching the choir, and Marley reveals that his granddaughter is in the choir, and he goes there to watch her sing because he's not allowed to see her because of the falling out with his son.
He is estranged from his kin.
Kevin impresses on him the importance. There's sort of a meeting of the minds that family is actually very important.
Absolutely. Kevin shows the growth, right? Because he talks to him about his fear and how he got over his fear, and that now Marley should get over his fear. What's the worst that can happen if you call? And Marley says, well, what if he doesn't want to talk to me? And then Kevin says, well, at least you would know, but you wouldn't be afraid anymore. That's the arc that's Kevin's gone through over that, is he's no longer afraid. He got dropped at home. First he enjoyed it. Then he had to face the fear of having to do stuff, having to be alone, the furnace, the outside, needing food, all that stuff. He goes through that arc of becoming a new person who's no longer afraid, who is reliant, and then the burglars show back up.
So a common theme is the extremely resourceful kid. There's a fantastic scene where Kevin stages the party with all the mannequins and the Michael Jordan standee.
Oh, that's great, to make the silhouettes, to make the burglars go.
Part of what's amazing about that movie is, you want to talk about the Macaulay Culkin explosion, which we should get into. After being part of the cast of Uncle Buck, Macaulay Culkin has to carry that movie because there are so many scenes that are just him playing off of himself.
He's alone for, half the movie or third of the movie?
He's not acting against anyone else. It's all through monologue that we come to understand what's going on.
But they keep it very simple, and I think they're all sort of showpiece scenes. Montage of him like jumping around, sped up things of him running up the stairs, doing his Home Alone scream, running at the camera in the grocery store. They do a good job of it, I think. Not to say that he wasn't a talented child actor, because he very much was, but they set everything up to play to his strengths or to any kid actor's strengths. He wasn't asked to do that sort of acting, tears coming down, having to play with all kinds of stuff. Kevin's stuff is very simple, physical, very reasonable to do for a kid, which is a smart move on their point, because a lot of times those performances go off because they're asked to do so much that may be beyond them. They really had a good, clear lane for this character and just let him have fun in that lane, and I think that shows through on screen.
Do you think Kevin's too smart for his age?
Well, yeah, of course, but It's a movie. Look at all the stuff he does. You give Kevin a toothpick, an old record, and a slinky, and suddenly he's set up this really intense booby trap.
1, 2, 10.
I think part of what I loved about some of the 80s protagonists were that invented their own things.
No, it's fun, and it serves this movie well. It's interesting because as we get into the burglary sequences, you go from a fairly funny but somewhat serious, grounded in reality movie. I can almost see you taking out the burglar stuff, and you could have actually another good movie in there of just this kid coming to grips with this situation he's in, this kind of Twilight Zone-ish wish comes true, and how he deals with that, and he ends up bonding with the scary old man neighbor and is able to become self-reliant. He goes from the beginning where he can't pack his own luggage. His sisters and brothers are saying that he couldn't do anything without his parents being there. He's a mama's boy and the mom has to take care of him.
Yes.
To this kid who is taking care of himself and doing everything and showing that he's not just that lump of something that everyone else has to deal with. So that could be a whole movie in and of itself. But then you get to the burglary and it becomes this cartoon. Obviously, as you mentioned with the gold tooth, they do wink at that at the very beginning, but then after that, they don't really touch upon it until the burglars show up, and this time they're not taking no for an answer.
That's when things get borderline Tex Avery. Not even borderline.
They're in it.
I mean,
This is Wile E. Coyote.
There is a point
stunts.
where Daniel Stern is electrocuted, and we see his skeleton every other frame.
Right, that is straight up cartoon.
Yeah, and it's fantastic. I mean, one thing in rewatching this with my nephew over the holiday that came back to me was how well shot and edited this movie is. It's very tight. It's very kinetic.
All those stunts look real. They sell it really well. All the edits and things, it really looks good. It looks like these guys are getting just hammered.
Even things like the sprint through the airport, though. They really rivet you and pull you in by just keeping this force of motion going through the film. There aren't a lot of dead spaces. It's kind of the same thing that I feel when I'm watching Raiders of the Lost Ark. There's no fat on that movie.
I think part of it with the kid, with the isolation, if you stop it, you slow it down, and you try to get contemplative, that's when you're going to die. That's when you're going to force that kind of kid character to have some kind of internal monologue or something that's going to really, if you're not Haley Joel Osment and you really can't sell it, that's where you're going to go, oh gosh, this has gone off the rails. So I think it's smart on them to just keep moving. They knew what they had to do.
We're going over the major beats, but part of the fun of the movie is in the sub-stories. I love the entire journey Catherine O'Hara as Kevin's mom has to get back to him, because they get to Paris and they can't get a flight back for 2 days.
A little planes, trains, and automobiles in there.
So she flies to Scranton, Pennsylvania, and then in an SCTV reunion, she meets John Candy, Gus Polinski, who's the leader of a polka band, who's going to rent a U-Haul. They're going to drive back to Milwaukee, and that'll get her far enough along. That moment when they're in the truck and she's trying to basically explain how terrible she feels for leaving her kid behind, and he says the bit about leaving their kids
in a funeral home.
In a funeral home for a couple hours. He's perfect. She's perfect. They're so great. That's one of the things that when I first saw it, I was 15 at the time, and it was a chaotic day. I know I'd gotten into a fight with my brother. And
very apropos for this movie.
Very apropos, and my father, even after the movie, was like, do you want to be like the Buzz in his life? And
you said yes.
No, because Buzz is awful. That story's great, which is funny because, well, I don't want to blow through the last part of the synopsis, but...
No, blow through it. I don't have all the beats of the burglary written down, but...
Well, the epic climax is Kevin turns the house into a death trap. It is ridiculously overwrought in that right down to, I mean, he has a zip line escape to the house across the street. The plan was that they would...
I think he calls the cops to come to the house.
Calls the cops to come to the house, but they get him.
Yeah, they do.
They get him, and then he is saved by old man Marley with his shovel, who proves that he could have murdered his family. He just didn't, because he dispatches Harry and Marv with speed and precision.
Let it be noted for the record that Marley does not kill them. He merely incapacitates them until the police arrive.
But like this 70-year-old man takes on
a heavy shovel, and he's strong.
2 hardened felons.
They're not hardened. They've gone through hell. They were probably ready to go at that point.
And
they'd been softened up by that death trap. They did not have a lot left in the tank to deal with Marlon.
Well, the building thing with their feet, almost shades of Die Hard, where Kevin's trap keeps escalating to play on...
Oh, that they've already gone through previous traps.
Right. Part of what I like is that it doesn't come out of nowhere, because earlier in the film, when Kevin's trying to get a pizza delivered, and he doesn't want to reveal that he's a child home alone, he uses the fake movie Angels with Filthy Souls, queued up correctly on the VCR, so that the antagonist in that movie has all the interactions, which leads to the epic quote from Home Alone, "Keep the change, you filthy animal."
Depending on how old you are, you may not have ever had to use the VCR. I can tell you that doing that kind of cueing like that with such precision is pretty much impossible, but it's a great moment.
Right, we didn't have MP3 players on phones.
No, or just sound clips and everything cut up.
Right. It's a great way to destroy a tape, too, because I know my brother loved the scene in Empire Strikes Back when R2-D2 gets all the feedback and goes flying, and he watched it so many times that one time...
No amount of tracking could save it.
One time I went back to watch Empire, and I could not figure out why the tape was breaking there, and later on in life...
He confessed.
He confessed. He was like, I love that scene. And then suddenly I had my Usual Suspects moment where I was like, Barbershop Quartet.
Oh, that's great.
He escapes and goes to sleep. Wakes up on Christmas morning and his wish hasn't come true. And he even explains, he goes to the town Santa. This is that thing where Kevin's smart, but he also believes in magic. He explains to the town Santa that he knows the guy isn't the real Santa, but he wants the fake Santa to tell the real Santa that he just wants his family back.
He goes there, he makes his second wish, in a sense, wakes up.
And they're not there.
They're not there.
It's so earned by that point. Yeah, the music swells, his mom walks in through the door, it's great, and then they know how to undercut it. The rest of the family drifts in, so she didn't even have to go through all that. She could have arrived minutes later with the rest of the family, but the whole family's back together and everybody is happy.
And they're all nice to him.
They're all nice to him, and then Buzz gets to his room, which Kevin had begun the destruction of earlier in the film when he tried to climb up on Buzz's shelves. More importantly, Buzz's tarantula are part of the final act's death trap.
Right, and they had shown the tarantula earlier kind of creeping around the house.
The tarantula is out there the whole movie and then is used for... It's a Deus Ex tarantula. The tarantula shows up just at the right point.
Yeah, that's what tarantulas are for. And that's the movie.
That's the movie. Kevin, the last thing is Buzz yelling, Kevin, what'd you do to my room? And Kevin makes a break for it.
Yeah.
He's back in hot water again. It's a delightful film. I know some people feel like Home Alone was the jump the shark moment for John Hughes because it's when he started making kids' movies.
It's hard to deny the popularity, how you might not look at that and say, I'm going to ride this gravy train until there's no more gravy in the bottom of this.
You know, he does that. He does Home Alone 2. He does Baby's Day Out. He does the Miracle on 34th Street remake.
That one's not bad. And Home Alone 2 is not bad.
Home Alone 2 is fantastic.
It repeats a lot of the same stuff, the same movie.
But they pull it off.
Yeah, they do. It's fun. Moving into a new venue is good. It does follow all the same beats. Like basically the exact same things happen, except now it's in the abandoned brownstone. That's some uncle or somebody who's not there, but it's the same things happen. They catch him right when he's
and
about
there's
to
a
escape.
Pigeon lady.
There's the pigeon lady instead of the old man. There's a bunch of stuff going on.
Harry and Marv
him.
somehow wound up in New York.
The mom finds him, I think, at the Rockefeller Center tree.
Yes.
It covers a lot of the same stuff. You got Tim Curry, which is great. And Rob Schneider, a young Rob Schneider. That's a no one for another time. We have Home Alone. You saw it, or you have memories of it seeing in the theater. I don't. What was the impact of this film on you at 15?
I was shocked at how much I liked it. I really thought it was going to be a dumb kids movie.
You'd seem to think so, given the advertisements, given that the protagonist is 10 years old, that it would be geared at your everyday 10-year-old or less.
I just remember watching the trailer and not buying into it. I was 15. That's that part of life where you're challenging. Like, I'm smarter than this. There's no way a family leaves their kid at home. They tick all the boxes.
Things make enough sense
Yeah.
as far as the setup.
It's silly movie logic, but they keep coming up with a reason for things. Things just don't happen because of movie.
I thought the setup they did a pretty good job. By the time you get to the slapstick stuff, I don't know what they do, because it is a tale of two movies where they just flip the switch and suddenly it's Tex Avery, Roadrunner, and Wile E. Coyote. But it works somehow. And maybe the only way that would work, because it ends up being not too dark and grim, because they keep getting up and it's totally done cartoon style where they can hit with metal paint cans or a big wooden beam that swings down and nails them. I mean, that's stuff that in a different movie would just be your death scene.
They're set on fire. They step on nails.
But it's fun. Like Three Stooges is fun, but it's in a more modern sense. It's filmed very well, and it keeps the movie moving along.
Stern and Pesci are fantastic. We were talking about this briefly before we started rolling. I don't think Harry and Marv would be out of place working on a crime with the Fratellis from the Goonies, because Robert Davi and Joe Pantoliano, who played the Fratelli brothers in that movie, are also fantastic with their physical comedy and also managed to be genuinely menacing.
The Stern and Pesci combo are not particularly menacing, which is fine. At the beginning of the movie, he seems like, wow, this guy is a real serious, sneaky, smart crook. But as soon as they get into actual action burglarizing, they quickly descend into idiotum. They're just dumb. They do dumb things all around. But it works because it's just so funny, and they sell the hell out of it. You know, so you don't really stop to think about the guy that's smart enough to have this whole cop setup would be falling for all that. Why wouldn't you just leave that house alone and just go burgle everybody else? But they just can't help themselves, and it descends into just being a cartoon, but it's a really fun cartoon.
It's a fun little universe. Even the whole sequence when they're trying to get the cops to go to the house.
Cop eating his donut.
The two police officers who need to talk to each other are right. There's like a partition between them.
Yeah, but they put them on hold and pass
They put them on
along.
hold. It's very much in Hughes' universe in how the characters react to each other. When we talk about how things go from slightly grounded to the absurd, he successfully done that in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. When I watched, I think it was the Criterion edition of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, they had talked about how originally he had thought of it as a lot more like Breakfast Club.
Okay.
It was just going to be consistently about disillusioned, privileged teens cutting school. Even to the whole point when his sister, played by Jennifer Grey, was going to go home with Charlie Sheen, and his father was going to beat him in front of her for getting sent home from school. I'm glad we got what we got, where the universe just can't seem to stick.
Though they do a better job in that one of keeping a consistent tone throughout. Because you take away the little gold tooth bling, and you wouldn't get a sense that this was a absurd, over-the-top comic movie until the burglary starts. But that's not until 2/3, 3/4 through the movie. There's a lot of movie before you get into the goofy burglary stuff.
That's why I think things like the police, like no one ever seems to just say, there's obviously a kid running around and we should stake out the house.
He doesn't come out a lot. The girl at the grocery store actually does question him, and he comes up with reasonable excuses to get out of there. They did kind of deal with that aspect of, if you're asking the question of why didn't adults wonder about Kevin, Kevin covers for himself pretty darn well at the supermarket, saying, I think his mom is in the car doing something, and that's why he's running in here. If you're looking for that moment saying, hey, why didn't anybody in the neighborhood show concern, you do have that little scene. Here's someone adult showing concern, and here's how Kevin covers for it. Of course, there's the annoying kid across the street who never seems to come out again, who would have seen Kevin, or seems to be so nosy you think he would have seen something, but that everyone in the neighborhood except for the old man pretty much disappears as soon as the family leaves.
Which, I've got to be honest, considering I've lived through enough Chicago winters, that's not out of the question, because if it's miserable and it's cold, you can kind of feel like you're on an island.
All right. I would say that they really do seem to flip a switch from maybe a little bit over the top, maybe a little bit more comic, to just being super insano. But it works. It's one of those weird things that I think in lesser hands, or maybe with just different people, not even lesser, that it wouldn't work. That it would feel too jarring to go from what seems like a fairly by the book, maybe a little bit funny, but still on a more realistic level, and all of a sudden it feels like they just go into a gear and suddenly it's Roadrunner. But they do it, and it works.
Yeah, and I will say, It works again in Home Alone 2.
It does. And you're saying in Home Alone 3?
Home Alone 3 is, I mean, it's diminished returns. The Home Alone 3, I don't know if Home Alone 3 was theatrically released, to be honest, or if it, how well it, well, I think it was, but I don't know how well it did. One of the things that cracks me up is Home Alone 1 was developed at Warner Brothers, and John Hughes promised he could make the movie for $10 million or under. They only wanted to give him something like $9 million. He had to clandestinely start the project over at Fox and wait for Warner Brothers to put it in a turnaround. And then it goes on to make $270 million. For something that was made relatively inexpensively for what blockbuster movies were being made for at that point, they saw a huge return, but it looks fantastic. And then when you get to Home Alone 3, and I don't know what the budget was for Home Alone 3, it looks kind of cheap. Nearly as cheap as Home Alone 4. But
once the accountants smell blood in the water, you know, they're going to try to save what they can, grab what they can, and certainly if it looks like it's going to direct-to-video or close, then they're not going to invest a lot of money in it. I don't know how Home Alone 2 did. It does well on cable and stuff now, well after the fact, but I don't know how that one did as far as when it came out anew. Do you remember?
I thought it did well. I thought it did. I know that, I shouldn't say it. I'm pretty sure the first one still has the highest box office, because I remember it being the highest grossing Christmas movie until, I think it was when The Grinch came along, which...
The Jim Carrey Grinch?
Yeah, and that movie did not deserve to knock it off.
That's depressing.
Don't see The Grinch.
No, do not see The Grinch.
And then, the Benedict Cumberbatch one came out. Or does it come out? Did that come out?
I don't know. I didn't know there was one. Is it an animated? The animated one? I think that came out last year.
Holy smokes, I didn't even see it.
I didn't see it either. Didn't look at it. I don't like that animation studio. I feel like their stuff is mostly junky. They did that terrible Lorax movie. Do not see the Lorax movie.
I'm sorry. It was a 2018 movie.
Home Alone 2 grossed domestic $173 million, worldwide $365. Budget was $18 million. And they're filming in New York City, so...
Holy smokes. And the co-director was Scott Mosier of Clerks fame? Wow.
So Home Alone, according to IMDb, had a budget of $18 million estimated.
Oh, really? Is that production, or is that like with print and...
It just
print and advertising is ridiculous.
It just says budget, doesn't say anything. So Home Alone 1 did gross more, 476 and a half, more or less, worldwide, which about 100 million more than...
Well, how fortunate that Warner Brothers was cheap, because otherwise we'd have to cough up for HBO Max to watch it, whereas now it's included in our Disney Plus subscriptions.
Yeah, it's coughing up for one subscription service or another one. Plus, Home Alone ends up on cable. Everyone listening to this won't even have to get Disney Plus, because TNT or TBS or somebody's just going to start rolling those 24-hour marathons of
Does
Home Alone
TBS
movies.
still show 24 straight hours of A Christmas Story?
I'm pretty sure they do. And I will check out at least a few of those hours, because A Christmas Story is one of those movies I can watch however much of it, wherever I hit the channel it's on, I can watch from that point through the next one, into the next one.
I'm embarrassed at, and maybe we'll do an episode on that one, because that's worth hashing out. But even that music that accompanies the Bumpus Hounds.
It's great.
Boom, boom, boom.
The Bumpus Hounds alone are amazing.
The Bumpus Hounds!
1, 2, 10.
But back to Home Alone. So we finished all that stuff. Is there any moments in particular that speak to you, that you love as a Chicagoan, as a lover of slapstick?
You bring up the Chicago thing. For me, what was wild was Ferris Bueller has this wonderful middle act where Ferris comes into the city and sort of takes over.
Not sort of, he does. He gets the key of the city, he's in the parade, singing Twist and Shout.
That's the weird dichotomy between how things work in Home Alone 1. He's out in the suburbs. It's not a Chicago story. Nothing Kevin does is intrinsically Chicago. No. It's much more in line with the Breakfast Club, where it all takes place out in...
any town in the USA.
Right. I don't know if being in the suburbs is the same thing now as it was in the early 90s, where you were slightly disconnected from things. I mean, now...
I imagine it's not. I mean, just being able to order stuff on Amazon and having it within a day, as opposed to having to schlep to the mall or have somebody drive you. All those things you needed to have to do back in the day, where you had to have your own wheels.
Sure.
Or you had to wait for that day when your mom or dad could take you, or some other kid you knew who had wheels could go with you and do all that stuff. Now you're just surfing online from your cell phone shopping cart to your house overnight.
Part of Home Alone is also when it happened. I mean, because cell phones would become a thing within 10 years. The kids would have them. And now we have smartphones and iPads.
Now you can get your groceries delivered to you. You can get your pizza delivered without even having to call anybody. Just pull it up on your smartphone.
Kevin would have been able to communicate with his mom in real time over text. I don't think you're going to be able to remake Home Alone. You're going to have to come up with some huge conceit if you're ever going to make a modern version of Home Alone.
Yeah, they'd have to do a few things, right? Because of the internet, they'd have to somehow disable the ability on one side or the other to get on the internet and tell people, or Kevin directly, oops, this happened.
Yeah, and that gets into the territory of being creepy scary.
Right, which it has for a little bit, because the stuff with the furnace is a little creepy scary. I think Agnes, my 5-year-old, if she was watching it, I think the furnace is a little bit creepy scary. But it doesn't last, because he gets over it pretty quickly. And even the old man, which is kind of a scary, creepy, they don't focus on that.
Right, and kids really shouldn't go and try to connect with strange old men in the neighborhood, especially when their parents are missing.
No, don't do that, children. 5-year-olds who are listening to this podcast, do not go contact old men in the street if you can't find your parents. Yes. Stranger danger, stranger danger.
Especially if your older brother told them they were murderers who skipped out on a life sentence.
Killed them with the very shovel that they're holding in their hand when you approach them.
Yeah, it's a wonderful film. I'm glad it happened. I think there's a certain alchemy. I say that a lot. But in how all those people came together, because I don't know.
Do you feel like if Hughes had done the writer-director thing again, you feel like Home Alone would have been a lesser movie?
I don't know if it would have been a lesser movie. I think coming off of the stuff he did with Amblin, because a lot of that is in this. This does feel, especially that third act, feels a lot more synonymous with the stuff that Spielberg and Donner were doing than the previous John Hughes movies.
True.
I love that. Not that John Hughes's auteur touches aren't there. It's one of those things that in the holiday season you talk about Christmas Story, that I have a soft spot for It's a Wonderful Life, The Nightmare Before Christmas, and National Lampoon's Christmas.
All right, so just a little extra topic here just because. Where do you stand on the Die Hard? Christmas movie or not Christmas movie?
I think it is a Christmas movie. What's funny is that it came out in summer, because I saw it over summer vacation with my dad.
Yeah, I think I did too. Similar situation.
It was after my parents had split up. My brother was doing something with my mom that weekend. I'm the older brother. So I went out to my dad's for the weekend. I knew nothing about the movie. It's 88, and that means I was 13, 12.
Okay.
Yeah. And my dad took me to see it. I had been a big fan of Bruce Willis on Moonlighting. I was unsettled because I'm pretty sure he was less on Moonlighting.
Well, that wasn't his first one. Didn't he do Blind Date first?
Yeah, but the weird thing was there was a whole season where David Addison was barely in Moonlighting.
Right. I also enjoyed Moonlighting a lot back in the day. But yeah, they do these weird specialty things with Mr. Pesto and what was the guy's name? Booger from...
Yeah.
I forget his name now. Blind Date was the year before, 1987.
And then there was the whole season where Sybil Shepherd was pregnant.
Moonlighting ran till 89, so he was definitely taking time away to make these movies.
That's when Bruce Willis got jacked. And David Addison, it was kind of like when on Parks and Recreation when Chris Pratt became Star-Lord.
Right.
Suddenly Andy Dwyer, who was supposed to be a beer-loving schlub, had a six-pack. It punctured the illusion of the world.
Sure.
It was funny because I saw it in the summer. I loved the way they used Christmas music in it. I loved the Now I Have a Machine Gun, Ho, Ho, Ho. Having spent a holiday season myself when I was living out in LA, Christmas is strange in LA.
I think it always gives me pause is it's not really about Christmas. So here's the thing, I guess, as a counterpoint. Nobody seems to ask, is Lethal Weapon a Christmas movie? Because it also takes place around Christmas, arguably has more Christmas stuff in it than Die Hard does, but I don't ever see anybody saying, hey, Lethal Weapon's a Christmas movie.
Yeah, gosh, Shane Black said so many of his movies in Christmas settings.
Mr. Joshua shows up at the house and it's deserted, but It's a Wonderful Life is playing in the background. He goes up to the tree and the tree's got some obnoxious note on it. And then the car comes through the glass front. And they have the famous fight on the lawn where he wants to fight Riggs for the title of baddest man alive.
Oh, and don't those poor cops end up dying because they don't properly...
Yeah, because he ends up taking the gun at the end and shooting a couple people.
Yeah.
But that's after the fight. He could have done that before.
Spoilers for Lethal Weapon. Die Hard, it's funny because I see Die Hard, it's a beautiful summer night. It was electric. I didn't see Die Hard coming. I had a great time. Die Hard's a fantastic movie.
Absolutely, one of my favorites.
What's weird is then it started being something that people pulled out to watch around Christmas. Later in life, when it became a thing where the argument of is Die Hard a Christmas movie, and almost in an effort to establish it as a Christmas movie, they were...
Yeah, I don't know why. It's such a good movie, and it's so popular in its own right. I don't think it needed a boost of now putting it in the Christmas pantheon. And as you said, its creators and the studio didn't consider it a Christmas movie. They didn't think about releasing it on Christmas. They put in the summer with the rest of the summer blockbusters.
Yes.
And it doesn't have any really thematically to do with Christmas. It just takes place during a Christmas party. Again, Lethal Weapon is the same.
But you talk about Lethal Weapon, yeah. But even where he uses the Christmas tape to tape the gun to his back.
Oh, no, they do some good things. Look, as much as Home Alone is about Christmas and the things that Christmas represents, there's nothing really about... If they could have taken that wrapping paper and done it with packing tape or other things that were not Christmas related, it doesn't really make those moments any lesser.
Maybe it is just putting a Santa hat on a terrorist. Yes, now I have a machine gun, ho, ho, ho. I think it's become a Christmas movie.
By force of will.
By force of will. Cultural zeitgeist. Because, again, I'm a man in my mid-40s. If you are under 30, you don't know this came out in the middle of the summer. Where it felt more appropriate with its LA background. Not any knock against people in LA or Florida where they're absolutely wonderful December days where not a fleck of snow or ice is on the ground, but...
Knock incoming.
But as someone who grew up in the Midwest and currently lives in New York, I associate the holidays with the sun going down at 4 p.m. and cold and often snow and ice.
Oh, no, me too. Absolutely.
So when it's palm trees and you're thankful for a cool breeze in the middle of the day, it's weird to see that be Christmas.
Sure.
Even though I know for millions of people, that is exactly what the season is. But
right. Wouldn't Lethal Weapon represent that better than Die Hard, since Die Hard takes place in the office building and they don't really show any palm trees or anything like that?
But there's all the Christmas decorations.
As far as showing the whole kind of LA Christmas. Because they don't really spend any time in LA. It's all at Nakatomi.
Not that Bruce Willis has been a delightful human being in his later years, but gosh, it has been so long since I watched a Mel Gibson movie. I can't remember a lot of things about Lethal Weapon. But do they use Christmas music in that? I know Riggs keeps talking about how he's going to eat a bullet one night.
I don't know if they use any music. I want to say that they do, but it's been a while since I've seen it. The reason why Lethal Weapon came to mind is it seems to be a forgotten franchise. It's got the Home Alone connection with Joe Pesci in, Lethal Weapon 2, 3, and beyond? Maybe, I don't know. I don't even remember how many they ended up making.
Well, okay.
The first Lethal Weapon, and I would say the second one too, are pretty enjoyable. I mean, the second one, I don't know. Your diplomatic immunity's been revoked.
Joss Ackland.
Why are you looking at the floor? Making sure not to stand on drop cloth. There's just some great stuff. The Krugerrands are always kind of cool.
The Lethal Weapon movies are extreme, at least the first two, and I can't really say I remember much of 3, which is a shame because I like Rene Russo. And 4, I just remember being kind of embarrassed for Jet Li.
I don't remember much of the fourth one. The third one I only vaguely remember. It's just interesting that two Christmas movies, Die Hard's had this big...
Well, because what is intrinsically Christmas about Lethal Weapon, though? Because the thing is, in Die Hard, the whole reason that John McClane is going to see Holly Gennaro, who, he finds out when he gets to the job that she's changed her last name.
She's taken her maiden name back.
Their marriage is falling apart and it's Christmas.
Riddle me this, Batman. Martin Riggs is in need of a family. And through this very special bonding that happens in the holiday season, he ends up at the end of the day with a family. And he gets to bring his dog, too.
He does, but boy, is there a body count in that movie. And it's
it's an action movie. How many people die in Die Hard?
I understand, but here's the other thing. Die Hard opens with a half-naked woman throwing herself off of a balcony.
Not Die Hard.
Lethal Weapon, sorry.
Yes.
Whereas Die Hard manages, I mean, there's one scene where that...
Makes balls with your toes, or whatever the guy says.
Well, I mean, but I'm trying to think, like, Die Hard has the one scene when the terrorists are busting things up and there's a couple getting frisky in one of the conference rooms.
That is correct.
Otherwise, there's no sexual content in that at all. The protagonists in Lethal Weapon are... Roger and his wife are fine, but even they point out that they busted their daughter for smoking weed.
He's got a boat. Doesn't know how to drive it, but he's got one.
And then Riggs, he spends half the film with a gun in his mouth.
Yes, with a special bullet, hollow point, do the job right.
Right. And there's a scene of intense torture.
Absolutely, with the guy who was in Die Hard. My friend used to call him the Incredible Extra or something like that, because he's an extra in all these movies. He's also in Big Trouble in Little China. There's a memorable shot of him eating a candy bar in Die Hard as they're waiting for the cops to show up.
Right, and they've got the whole siege... thing built.
Send in the car. Send in the car.
Not that Die Hard doesn't have a body count. Not that it's not a graphic movie, but I do feel on some bizarre level it's more wholesome than
Wow.
It has such a John Wayne, like, he got his woman back, that with his filthy blood and sweat and elevator grease smeared tank top, he walks out with his wife at the end, and she's Holly McClane. Just to make sure everybody gets there, she gets to knock out
William Atherton.
And
has to do what the Ghostbusters never did. Punch him out.
Yes. It's fantastic.
Look, I love Die Hard, and I like Die Hard more than Lethal Weapon. Ultimately, I think Die Hard is a better film than Lethal Weapon. It's just interesting. You have a tale of two movies that both take place around the holiday that don't really interface with the holiday much at all. I don't even think they mention the word Christmas in Die Hard, maybe more than once. Maybe on the airplane in that first scene when he's like, oh, I'm coming back for the holiday party.
I thought when he and the limo when McClane and the limo driver are going to the party in the opening, he talks about...
Okay, so maybe they mention it twice.
He talks about Christmas, and it's a Christmas party.
Yes, it's a holiday party. I don't even know if they even call it a Christmas party. Yes, it takes place around Christmas. For all we know, they're celebrating Kwanzaa as well.
But they have a Santa.
Yes, they
do. There's a Christmas tree.
There's a Christmas tree at the house. Mr. Joshua even shoots the car saying, Merry Goddamn Christmas, at the end of Lethal Weapon. Does that count for holiday cheer?
These are Shane Black films.
I like them both. It just occurred to me that nobody fights over trying to make Lethal Weapon. Maybe it's the Mel Gibson effect. That's all I got for Christmas movies. I just thought it was interesting. It just occurred to me today that Lethal Weapon never gets talked about as your Christmas action movie. Go watch Die Hard, and after you've watched Die Hard, go watch Lethal Weapon. They're both great movies.
No, let's be honest. There's a reason Mel Gibson films aren't watched as much anymore.
But he's already had his comeback. He's been through his purgatory. He's making beaver movies and Mexican weird movies. He even made some movie where he plays a genius, or is he the doctor? I don't know. There's something, I think it's on Netflix.
Well, are we talking about Apocalypto?
No. No, there's one he did with Spicoli. It's about the writing of a dictionary or almanac. It's a true story in the 19th century. An American who was a Looney Tune, but he was some kind of genius, but he was crazy. And this person trying to put together the dictionary. They came together against all odds. Society, mores, it's all Victorian, it's all madness, it's big beards and top hats. And they're working on this dictionary together, the doctor and the madman.
Yeah, that's fine. I hate Braveheart. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Braveheart
Happy Thanksgiving.
sucks.
Watch Home Alone. Watch Home Alone 2. Maybe with a few caveats. Check out Home Alone 3 if you can without putting any money
It's
down.
on Disney Plus, and if you have extra time while you're hanging your ornaments or baking your cookies, there's some funny stuff in there. The kid and the parrot are cute.
There you go. That's quite the endorsement. I'm sure they'll print that on the next box. Watch it instead of Braveheart. So says Will. All right, I guess we'll talk to you later. That's all we got. Have a great holiday.
Talk to you soon.
Next.